very excited to be here in a group of women leaders because we've already heard so many examples of how women's leadership matters. And one thing we know, if nothing else, is that some leaders are born women. Now, that wasn't always believed, but it's very clear now that some leaders are born women. Women like, if you would move ahead, I don't have a clicker here, so I'm going to count on whoever's running the slides here. Women like Marissa Mayer, who was the CEO of Yahoo, who famously left her high-level perch at Google, which was a very obviously successful company, for this post when she was pregnant with her first child. So that was unprecedented. First CEO of a public company in the United States who, was pregnant. And she spurred a doubling of Yahoo's value in her first year at the helm. Or Aung San Suchi, whom I'm sure most of you are familiar with, an opposition leader in Myanmar, or formerly Burma, and winner of the 1991 Nobel Peace Prize, who brought about a revolution to elevate the well-being of her people after decades spent under house arrest. Or Christine Lagarde, managing director of the International Monetary Fund and a likely candidate for the next president of France. Or Valerie Jarrett, senior advisor to President Obama and a former Chicago lawyer, businesswoman, and civic leader who helped Obama win in 2008 and has remained a key advisor ever since. And she's one of the few who stayed with him all this time, and she's still there. Well, and of course, if I may move ahead, Hillary Clinton, former US Secretary of State and potential candidate for the 2016 US presidential election. Stay tuned, we're expecting an announcement any day now. But what differentiates these world leaders from those who do not rise to the top? We are all here in this room seeking to make a difference. And the difference we make will be defined by the amount of leadership we can exert around the shared values, as we were hearing, that we all hold. Well, given that the World Economic Forum predicts that women will only reach leadership parity in 2095, that's not in my lifetime, I don't know about you, that's not in my lifetime. To accelerate this progress, we need to understand this better so we can each fulfill our full leadership potential. So what can we learn from these remarkable women who have made it to the top of their fields? Over the years, as I mentioned earlier, I've had the privilege and pleasure of both observing Secretary Clinton during her various life phases as a first lady and then a senator, and then working with her as a presidential candidate and Secretary of State. And I began to realize why this woman was different and what it was that enabled her to rise to the top and lead as she always does. So today I'd like to share with you 4 things I've learned from Hillary Clinton about leadership, because it's a lesson in what those who rise to the top all do, no matter where in the world they lead, and no matter whether they're male or female, by the way. So first, leaders have vision. In 1995, First Lady Hillary Clinton was scheduled to address the UN Fourth World Congress on Women in Beijing, China. Now, I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember that, but a series of diplomatic crises emerged threatening to prevent her from attending. Yet she knew that this was her chance to set out her vision for women's rights. And she did just that. In a remarkable speech that we have all heard over and over again, that was instantly recognized as a milestone and has become a manifesto of sorts for women's advocates all over the world, she said what no one else would. And something perhaps we take for granted today, but we should never take for granted, and that is that human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights once and for all. Now with that, thank you for all of you women's advocates out here. With that, she set a high bar for equality that no country in the world had achieved, and that has inspired others to pursue ever since. Declaring her vision boldly, in front of an audience both powerful and potentially threatened by it, and then inspiring others to work on this mission as hard as she does, has demonstrated to the world what an extraordinary leader Hillary is. Now, the second lesson is that leaders take risks. So if you would, this is, leaders have vision. This is her Beijing Women's speech, and if you would advance it again, please. Thank you. One more. Thank you. On January 20th, 2007, Hillary announced the formation of a presidential exploratory committee saying, "I'm in, and I'm in to win." At the time, as a two-term senator, former first lady, ex-law firm partner, and published author, she had plenty of accolades and accomplishments to her credit, so without having to step up to this great challenge and responsibility. And yet, as a determined leader, she was willing to take the risk to promote the values and initiatives that is deemed essential to the prosperity of the American people and the world. Bottom line, leaders lead. You take the risks, you do what you have to do. And I think, with all due respect, to paraphrase His Holiness, when he says about women dominating, we know he doesn't mean that physically or in a negative way. It's about women stepping up to leadership, and that's what we all need to do. Shortly after she announced, I joined the Finance Council of the campaign, though I'd never done anything political at all in my life. So you heard that I was in the private sector. I was a banker. I was 13 years in the corporate executive at American Express and Bank of America, and then became a serial entrepreneur in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I'd never done anything political. I was very active in the community. I was president of the Financial Women's Association and head of various community organizations. But I stepped up when Hillary announced because I thought, I've got to help this woman get there. I campaigned and helped organize, host some major fundraising events for her. If you'd advance that, please. This photo was taken of me and Hillary at an event at her home. It was taken at the first fundraising event at her home in the 2008 campaign. And I was one of several hosts. We had a full house, and we raised almost $250,000 for her campaign in 2008 at that first event. And we went on to do much more. It was the night after the New Hampshire primary, which she won, and a couple of nights after the all-important Iowa caucuses, which she didn't win. And I asked her how she was able to sustain her energy level throughout the intense campaign. And with a smile, she said to me, vitamins. So I said, I want a case of those. More than anything, though, I wanted this leader who was taking all kinds of personal risks on behalf of the country to succeed. With each step forward, she inspired each of us to do more. The third lesson is that leaders adapt. Now, you may find it funny that I use this photo for talking about women adapting, but Hillary always makes the joke that if she ever wants to knock a bad news story off the front page of the New York Times, she changes her hairdo. And though it's a sad commentary on how women leaders are reflected, hey, listen, whatever works, right? So though she garnered over 18 million votes in the primaries leading up to the 2008 election, Hillary lost out narrowly to Obama. That said, she stayed in the race to the bitter end. She, demonstrating her tenacity, her determination, and her dedication. After the primaries ended, even Obama had to concede, quote, I honor her today for the valiant and historic campaign she has run, he said. She shattered barriers on behalf of my daughters and women everywhere who now know there are no limits to their dreams. And as we now know, this wasn't the last thing Obama would say about Hillary. To her credit, when she gave her concession speech, she threw the full weight of her support to Obama, saying, quote, the way to continue our fight now to accomplish the goals for which we stand is to take our energy and our passion, our strength, and all we can to help elect Barack Obama the next president of the United States, once again demonstrating that her heart is as big as her brain. And once again, inspiring us all to move forward and adapt the way leaders do. It was no doubt that this gracious concession, along with Hillary's incomparable record and reputation, that led President Obama to ask her to join his cabinet as his Secretary of State. After declining twice, she accepted and went on to achieve many great things. The New York Times noted how quickly she adapted. Even before taking office, Hillary Rodham Clinton is seeking to build an even more powerful State Department with a bigger budget, high-profile special envoys to trouble spots, and an expanded role in dealing with global economic issues at a time of crisis. Fortunately for me, one of those economic issues she chose to deal with was the empowerment of women and youth through entrepreneurship. I was recruited initially to launch an initiative on global women's entrepreneurship, and then to take over the Global Entrepreneurship Program, which we grew to almost 150 countries. The secretary was supportive throughout. It became clear that ambassadors all over the world loved promoting what many considered to be the best part of the American brand, that is entrepreneurship. And for me personally, it was thrilling to have the Secretary's backing to launch many programs through public-private partnerships. Programs that have helped train, incubate, fund, and grow startups all over the world. By showing us how to adapt, or pivot as we say in the entrepreneurship world, Secretary Clinton inspired us to transform economic statecraft as a major pillar of diplomacy. And last, but certainly not least, the last lesson is that leaders elevate others. At the State Department, Secretary Clinton provided leadership on dozens of issues, from nuclear nonproliferation and arms control. Many don't know that she negotiated our first nuclear nonproliferation treaty in over 20 years with Russia. That's not often thought about. To addressing world hunger, to rebuilding after the Arab Spring, and many, many more issues that she championed. She traveled almost 1 million miles during her 4 years of service, meeting with world leaders and offering her very personal style of leadership, inspiring so many wherever she traveled. But if there's one set of issues and initiatives for which she's most known, that would have to be the empowerment of women. Throughout her time as secretary, she never lost her passion for the issue that she called the unfinished business of the 21st century, the empowerment of women. Not only did she establish the first ambassador at large for global women's issues, but she supported the efforts of every department and bureau at the State Department to mainstream a gender agenda. The book she wrote about her term as secretary, Hard Choices, has an entire chapter focused on this, and so many other efforts that we had at State also reflected it. It leads to this last lesson of leadership that Hillary Clinton taught me, that true leaders are not about elevating themselves, but rather about elevating and inspiring others to their greatest potential. And with that in mind, it won't surprise you to hear that I left the State Department shortly after she did in April of 2013 to do two things. First, to promote entrepreneurship and elevate entrepreneurs globally to their fullest potential, so I still work on that all over the world. And secondly, and perhaps most importantly, to elevate one presidential candidate to her fullest potential, as I now serve as National Finance Co-Chair for the Ready for Hillary Political Action Committee. So along with Hillary, a leader who was born a woman, I can also say that, if you will move the slide please, I hope I will see a woman president in my lifetime. And I hope I will see more women rise to the top of their field by creating a vision, taking risks, adapting, and elevating others. Thank you very much.